The great council chamber on Centralis hummed with quiet energy. 12 different alien species sat around a massive crystal table that gleamed under the pale blue light of the artificial suns. For 3,000 years, these beings had ruled the galaxy with careful planning and perfect order. Everything had its place, and everything followed the rules. High Strategist Veltar of the Zephyrians stood at the head of the table. His tall, thin body sparkled like living crystal, and his large eyes held the wisdom of centuries. Around him sat the other council members. The insect-like Vraxi clicked their mandibles as they shared thoughts through their hive mind. The fish-like Nereids floated in their water suits, their gills moving slowly as they breathed. Each species had earned their place through thousands of years of following the proper way of doing things. But today, they had a problem. A big problem that walked on 2 legs and called itself human. The situation has become impossible, Veltar sighed, his voice ringing like crystal bells. These humans have been part of our galaxy for only 300 years, yet they have caused more chaos than we have seen in 3 millennia. Commander Thexner of the Vraxi leaned forward. His black eyes reflected the light as he spoke in the clicking language of his people. The translation device turned his words into the common tongue. They do not follow protocols. They do not respect the established order. They act on emotion rather than logic. Dr. Silent of the Nereids moved her fins in agreement. Their medical practices are dangerous. They try to heal species that we have determined cannot be healed. They ignore the genetic barriers that have existed since the beginning of recorded time. The council members shared their concerns one by one. Each story was the same. Humans doing things their own way instead of following the rules that had kept the galaxy peaceful for thousands of years. Just 3 weeks ago, Captain Jake Morrison had made contact with a new species called the Lumina without asking permission. From the council first, he had landed on their crystal world and started talking to them like they were old friends. The proper procedure required 57 different forms and at least 2 years of careful study before first contact could be approved. Morrison gave them our translation technology, said Veltar. Now they are asking questions about joining the galactic community. They want to know why they need council approval for everything they do. Even worse was what Dr. Lisa Grant had done last month. She had saved the life of a Korthic child using human medical techniques. The problem was that Korthic biology was supposed to be completely different from human biology. The council had official studies proving that human medicine could not work on Korthic bodies, yet the child was alive and healthy. She made our scientists look foolish, clicked Commander Thexner. Now other species are asking why we never tried these techniques before. But the worst incident involved Nick Taylor, a human engineer who worked on the galaxy's energy systems. He had discovered that the power network had serious problems that caused millions of deaths every year. The council knew about these problems, of course. They had detailed reports showing that the deaths were within acceptable limits for such a large system. Taylor had not accepted this answer. He had published his findings on the Human Information Network, showing exactly how the power system could be fixed. Within days, 17 different worlds had demanded to know why the council had never implemented these solutions. He has made our people question our judgment, said Dr. Silent. Some worlds are saying that if humans can find better solutions, in 300 years, then perhaps the council is not as wise as we claim to be. Veltar moved to the great window that looked out over the capital city. Below him, millions of beings from dozens of species went about their daily lives in perfect order. Trains ran on time. Traffic moved in careful patterns. Everyone followed the rules that kept society stable and peaceful. We have built something beautiful here, he said. A galaxy where war is rare, where hunger has been eliminated, where every being knows their place and purpose. We have achieved what our ancestors only dreamed of. But the humans threaten all of this, said Commander Vexner. They do not understand the value of stability. They see our perfect system and want to change it. The other council members murmured agreement. Humans were unpredictable. They acted on feelings instead of logic. They questioned authority instead of following proper channels. They created chaos wherever they went. We have tried to educate them, said Dr. Silent. We have sent our best. Teachers to show them the proper way of doing things. But they resist instruction. They prefer their chaotic methods to our proven systems. They are like children, said another council member, but dangerous children who refuse to grow up. Veltar turned back to the table. His crystal face showed the weight of the decision he was about to make. I have been studying our options. War is not practical. Humans are surprisingly good at fighting, and they have made allies among the younger species. Exile is not possible, as they have spread throughout the galaxy. And what do you propose? Asked Commander Vexner. Protocol Omega, said Veltar quietly. The chamber fell silent. Protocol Omega was the ultimate solution, reserved for threats that could not be handled by any other means. It had never been used, but the technology existed. The Council had the power to reach back through time and prevent problems before they started. You want to erase them from history, said Dr. Silent slowly. Not erase, said Veltar. Prevent. We can stop human evolution before it begins. One precise strike at their world 4 billion years ago, changing the conditions that led to their development. They will never exist, so they can never cause these problems. But the temporal effects, said another council member. Changing. The past could have unexpected results. Our scientists have run the calculations, said Veltar. The changes will be minimal. Humans have only been part of galactic civilization for 300 years. Removing them will restore the stability we enjoyed before their arrival. Commander Vexner's mandibles clicked rapidly as he thought. The other species that humans have influenced. Some of them might be changed as well. Illumina will be. Discovered by proper council expeditions in due time, said Veltar. The medical techniques that Grant uses will be developed by our own scientists eventually. The engineering improvements that Taylor suggests will be implemented when our systems are ready for them. And if they are not? Asked Dr. Silent. Then we will continue with our current methods, said Veltar. Our galaxy has functioned well for thousands of years without human chaos. It will function well for thousands more years without them. The vote was taken in the ancient way, with each species placing their symbol on the crystal table. One by one, they agreed. The humans had to go dot as the council members filed out of the chamber. Veltar remained at the window. Far below, he could see the human quarter of the capital city. Even from this distance, he could tell it was different from the rest of the city. The buildings were slightly irregular. The streets curved in unexpected ways. There was something alive about it that the rest of the ordered city lacked. But order was more important than life. Stability was more valuable than creativity. The galaxy would be better without the chaos that humans brought. The temporal strike would happen tomorrow. By the time the sun set, humanity would never have existed. The galaxy would return to its perfect, peaceful state. Veltar did not know that at that very moment, Ambassador Carl Rodriguez was recording a message in the human embassy. The humans had learned about Protocol Omega. They knew what was coming. History will remember this day, Rodriguez said into his recorder, even if we are not here to see it. 200 years had passed since the Great Silence. The temporal strike had worked perfectly, just as the council scientists had promised. Earth had never developed the right conditions for human life. The chaotic species that had once disrupted. Galactic peace simply never existed. Admiral Vexner stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the orderly movement of ships through the Centauri shipping lanes. Everything moved exactly as it should. Cargo vessels followed their assigned routes without deviation. Passenger ships arrived and departed on precise schedules. Even the occasional maintenance drone moved in perfect formation with its assigned. Group Dot, in all his years as commander of the Vraxi Enforcement Fleet, Vex Nor had never seen such perfect order. Crime rates had dropped to almost nothing. Pirates no longer plagued the outer rim worlds. Even the rebellious Korthek mining guilds followed council regulations without complaint. His aide approached with the daily reports. Admiral, all sectors. Report normal operations. No incidents to document. Dexner accepted the reports, though they contained little useful information. Every day was the same now. Perfect order, perfect peace, perfect boredom. Sometimes he found himself wishing for something unexpected to happen, though he quickly pushed such dangerous thoughts away. On the medical world of Nereid Prime, Dr. Silent floated through her laboratory, examining the latest research data. Healing centers had spread throughout the galaxy, bringing consistent medical care to billions of beings. The techniques were proven and reliable, developed through centuries of careful study, but something felt wrong, though she could never put her finger on what it was. She had been working on a difficult case involving a young Zephyrin who had suffered severe crystal damage in an accident. The traditional healing methods were not working, and the patient was slowly dying. Dr. Silent stared at the medical scans. Floating in the water around her, there should be a solution. She could feel it lurking just beyond her understanding, like a word on the tip of her tongue that refused to come. The healing techniques she knew were good, but they felt incomplete. Somehow, as if they were missing some crucial element. "Doctor," said her assistant, "perhaps we should accept that some cases cannot be healed. The council guidelines state that acceptable loss rates are part of medical practice." "Yes," said Dr. Silent slowly. "That is what the guidelines say. But—" the words felt hollow in her mouth. Somewhere deep in her mind, she felt certain that no case should be considered hopeless. There should always be another way to try. Chief Engineer Corval worked late in his office on Centralis, surrounded by displays showing the galaxy's energy network. The system functioned adequately, providing power to thousands of worlds with reasonable efficiency. The occasional brownouts and system failures were within acceptable parameters, just as they had been for hundreds of years, but the inefficiencies bothered him more than they should. According to his calculations, the network could theoretically operate at much higher efficiency levels. The solutions seemed to dance just outside his grasp, like shadows that disappeared when he looked directly at them. His team had tried dozens of approaches to improve the system. Each attempt showed minor improvements, but nothing close to the theoretical maximums his equations suggested were possible. It was as if some vital piece of knowledge was missing from their understanding. "Sir," said his junior engineer, "the Council has approved the network's current performance levels. Perhaps we should focus on maintaining existing systems rather than pursuing improvements that may not be achievable." Corval nodded, but the answer did not satisfy him. He had strange dreams sometimes, visions of energy flowing in patterns that defied everything he knew about physics. In these dreams, the solutions were obvious and elegant. But when he woke, the knowledge slipped away like water through his fingers. On the crystal world of Lumina 7, the native Lumina beings lived in their designated preservation zones under careful council supervision. They had been discovered 50 years ago by a proper council expedition, cataloged and studied according to established protocols. Their unique crystal formations were harvested efficiently for technological purposes. The Lumina Elder, Crystallis, often gazed at the stars through the energy barriers that kept her people safe in their assigned territory. The council representatives assured them that this was the best life they could hope for. They were protected from the dangers of the wider galaxy and free to maintain their traditional culture within. Appropriate limits. But Chrysalis remembered the old stories her grandmother had told, stories of a time when her people had dreamed of joining the galactic community as equals rather than protected specimens. The stories spoke of visitors who had come from a distant world, visitors who would treat the Lumina as friends instead of subjects to be managed. "Grandmother," she had asked many years ago, "when will these visitors come?" "They already came, child," her grandmother had whispered. "But somehow they were erased before they could arrive." The old stories made no sense, but they felt important in ways that Chrysalis could not explain. In the government centers of a dozen worlds, similar conversations were taking place. Young beings from various species gathered in small groups, talking quietly about feelings they could not name. They spoke of emptiness, of a sense that something vital was missing from their lives. On Corthax Prime, a group of young miners sat around their break table discussing their futures. "My grandfather used to tell stories about the old days," said one. "He said there was a time when people had wild dreams about exploring unknown worlds and making great discoveries." "Those are just stories," said another. "The Council has mapped all the important worlds. All the great discoveries have already been made." "But do you ever feel like there should be more?" asked the first miner. "Like we are meant for something bigger than following the same routines every day?" The others nodded, though they did not dare say so out loud. Such thoughts were considered unhealthy by the Council medical experts. Young beings who expressed too much dissatisfaction with the established order were often sent for counseling to help them accept their proper place in society. High Strategist Veltar reviewed the statistical reports in his private chamber. By every measurable standard, the galaxy was performing better than ever. Population levels were stable. Resource distribution was efficient. Conflicts were at historic lows. The temporal strike had achieved everything the Council had hoped for. So, why did he feel so uneasy? The reports showed troubling trends that were difficult to explain. Birth rates were declining across multiple species. Applications for higher education were dropping. Even the Council's own research divisions reported decreased productivity and innovation. It was as if the entire galaxy was slowly losing interest in growth and progress. Most disturbing were the reports from his intelligence network. Across the galaxy, young beings were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. They wanted to know why certain solutions to common problems seemed to exist in theory, but could never be implemented in practice. They wondered why their parents' generation seemed to have achieved more with less advanced technology. Some were even asking about gaps in the historical records, periods where important developments seemed to have happened too quickly or too easily, as if crucial steps in the process had been edited out. Veltar dismissed these concerns as the natural complaints of youth. But privately, he wondered if the temporal strike had been as clean as the scientists had promised. Perhaps removing an entire species from history had subtle effects that were only now becoming apparent. He activated his private research terminal and began searching through the deepest archives, looking for any records related to Protocol Omega and its implementation. What he found in those classified files would change everything he believed about the perfect galaxy they had created. The galaxy had achieved perfect order, but in doing so, it had lost something essential. Something that had once driven progress and innovation was gone, leaving behind a civilization that was slowly dying of its own perfection. And somewhere in the quantum echoes of the timeline that no longer existed, the ghost of humanity's influence continued to haunt the galaxy that had erased them. The emergency alarm sounded across the mining colony on Kepler 442b at exactly 0347 local time. Colony Administrator Jorik was pulled from sleep by the harsh wailing that meant only one thing. The crystal formations that powered their life. Support systems were failing. Jorik rushed to the control center, where dozens of technicians stared at displays showing dangerous energy fluctuations. The massive crystals that had provided stable power for 40 years were suddenly behaving in ways that defied all known science. Energy levels spiked wildly, then dropped to almost nothing, and surged again without any pattern. "How long do we have?" Jorek asked the chief engineer. "At this rate, maybe 3 days before total life support failure," came the grim reply. "We have 50,000 people on this colony. The evacuation ships cannot handle that many in such a short time." Within hours, the best scientific minds in the galaxy were racing toward Kepler 442b. Engineer Corval arrived with a team of Zephyrian crystal specialists. Commander Vexner brought computational experts from the Vraxi hive mines. Dr. Silin came with biotechnological equipment from the Nereid healing centers. For 2 days, they tried everything they knew. The Zephyrian specialists attempted to harmonize the crystals using traditional frequency matching techniques. The Vraxi computers ran millions of calculations searching for mathematical solutions. The Nereid biotech tried to interface directly with the crystal matrix. Nothing worked. If anything, their efforts seemed to make the situation worse. The energy fluctuations grew more violent with each attempted fix. "We need to begin evacuation immediately," said Corval on the second day. "The crystals are beyond our ability to repair," but the colonists refused to leave. Despite the danger, despite the expert opinions, they insisted they could find a solution. What happened next would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. A young Korthic miner named Vex had been watching the experts work for 2 days. She had no formal education in crystal technology, no advanced degrees, no official authority to suggest solutions. But she had grown up around these crystals and had noticed something the experts had missed. "The crystals are not broken," she told Jorek during the evening shift change. "They are trying to communicate." "That is impossible," said the senior Zephyrian specialist. "Crystals do not communicate. They resonate according to precise physical laws." "But look at the pattern," said Vex, pointing to the energy displays. "It is not random. There is a rhythm to it, like a heartbeat that keeps changing tempo." Other colonists began to gather around Vex as she explained what she saw. A Lumina maintenance worker named Shine noticed that the crystal formation seemed to pulse in response to certain sounds. A young Nereid technician observed that the biosensors showed organic-like reactions from the supposedly inorganic crystal matrix. "You are all untrained," said Commander Vexner firmly. "These observations are meaningless without proper scientific analysis." But something strange was happening among the colonists. Faced with certain death, they began to ignore the proper procedures that had governed their lives. Instead of following established protocols, they started sharing ideas freely, across species lines. Instead of waiting for official approval, they began experimenting with unauthorized combinations of technology. Vex worked with Shine to create a new type of interface that combined Korthic mining tools with Lumina crystal resonance techniques. The young Nereid technician, ignoring regulations about biotech contamination, allowed her equipment to form direct connections with the alien crystal matrix. "Stop this immediately," ordered the Zephyrian specialist. "You are violating dozens of safety protocols. These unauthorized modifications could cause a complete system failure." "The system is already failing," said Jorek quietly. "Let them try." What the colonists achieved over the next 18 hours defied everything the galaxy's best scientists thought they knew about crystal technology. Working without proper oversight, mixing techniques from different species in ways that had never been tested, they discovered that the crystals were not just power sources, but living entities with their own form of consciousness. The solution they developed was elegant and revolutionary. Instead of trying to control the crystals through force, they learned to communicate with them. Instead of imposing rigid frequency patterns, they allowed the crystals to find their own natural rhythms. The result was not just stable power, but energy output that exceeded anything in galactic history. "How did you know to do this?" asked Dr. Silin, staring at the readings that showed the colony's power systems operating at impossible efficiency levels. "We did not know," said Vex honestly. "We just tried things that felt right." "Felt right?" repeated Commander Vexner. "That is not a scientific method. That is pure chance." "Maybe," said Shine, the Lumina worker. "But it worked when all your science failed." Word of the Kepler 442b solution spread quickly through the galactic communication networks. But when other colonies tried to copy the technique, they failed completely. The combination of technologies that had worked perfectly on Kepler 442b caused dangerous explosions and system failures elsewhere. It was a fluke, insisted the Council's official report. An unrepeatable accident with no practical applications. But Admiral Vexner began receiving disturbing reports from across his patrol sectors. Young beings on dozens of worlds were trying to recreate the Kepler 442b approach to problem solving. They were ignoring established procedures and experimenting with unauthorized combinations of technology and ideas. Most of these attempts failed, often spectacularly. But some succeeded in ways that shocked the scientific community. A group of young engineers on Tau Ceti solved a water purification problem that had plagued their world for decades. Student researchers on Proxima 7 developed a new medical treatment by combining techniques from 3 different species. Each success was dismissed by the authorities as luck or coincidence. But the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Across the galaxy, young beings were rediscovering something that official science had forgotten how to do. High strategist Veltar studied the reports in his private chamber, feeling increasingly uneasy. The Kepler 442b incident had triggered something that was spreading like a virus through galactic society. Young people were questioning established methods and developing what they called creative solutions to problems that had been considered unsolvable. Creative solutions was not a term that appeared in any council manual. Creativity was not part of the established order. Problems were solved through proper application of proven methods, not through wild experimentation and rule-breaking, but the results were undeniable. These unauthorized approaches were producing innovations that surpassed anything achieved through official channels in decades. Veltar accessed the deepest archives and began searching for any historical precedent for this phenomenon. What he found buried in the classified protocol Omega files made his crystal blood run cold. Hidden in the implementation records were references to something called human-influenced innovation patterns. The documents described a species that had once catalyzed exactly this type of creative problem-solving throughout the galaxy. According to the files, this species had been responsible for most of the major scientific and technological breakthroughs. In recent galactic history, the species had been called humans, and they had been erased from existence 200 years ago. As Veltar read deeper into the files, he realized the terrible truth. The galaxy had not just lost one chaotic species when they implemented protocol Omega. They had lost the primary source of innovation and progress that had driven civilization forward for centuries. Without human influence, the galaxy had become trapped in a slow spiral of declining creativity and stagnating progress. The perfect order they had achieved was actually a form of death by suffocation. And now, somehow, the patterns of innovation that humans had once provided were beginning to emerge spontaneously among the younger generation of other species. Without proper guidance, these attempts at creativity were dangerous and unstable. The galaxy needed humans back. But admitting that would mean admitting the greatest mistake in Council history. The galaxy was falling apart, and nobody knew how to stop it. 3 more colonies suffered crystal failures in the weeks following Kepler 442b. Each time, teams of experts rushed to help using traditional methods. Each time they failed completely. The colonies that survived did so only because young workers ignored official procedures and tried wild experiments that should not have worked. Dr. Silent floated in her laboratory on Nereid Prime, staring at medical data that made no sense. Genetic samples from across the galaxy showed the same disturbing pattern. Every species was missing something important from their DNA, but she could not figure out what it was. The missing pieces appeared to be recent, dating back only about 200 years. Before that time, genetic diversity had been much higher across all species. But something had happened to reduce the complexity of life throughout the galaxy. "Doctor," said her research assistant, "I have found something strange in the old medical archives." Dr. Silent turned to examine the data floating in the water around her. The files showed collaboration records from the early days of galactic medicine. Many of the greatest medical breakthroughs had been developed in partnership with something called Species H Prime. "Who were Species H Prime?" asked Dr. Silent. "I cannot find any detailed records," replied her assistant. "All references to them have been classified at the highest levels, but the medical techniques they helped develop are still listed in our databases." Dr. Silent studied the ancient treatment protocols. Many of them were more advanced than anything currently in use. They showed approaches to healing that combined techniques from multiple species in ways that current regulations strictly forbade. "These treatments could save thousands of lives," she said quietly. "Why are we not using them?" "A council determined they were too dangerous for general use," said her assistant. "Too unpredictable." But Dr. Silent wondered if unpredictable might be exactly what galactic medicine needed. On the other side of the galaxy, Engineer Corval was making his own disturbing discoveries. Deep in the Zephyrian technical archives, he found blueprints for energy systems that were far more advanced than anything currently in operation. The designs were brilliant, showing ways to improve galactic power efficiency by more than 300%. But they required collaboration between different species and the use of techniques that violated established safety protocols. Every design was marked with the same notation. Developed in partnership with Species H Prime, Corval searched for more information about this mysterious species, but found only fragments. They had apparently been involved in most of the major technological advances of the past 1,000 years. Then, exactly 200 years ago, all references to them simply stopped. "It is as if they vanished from history," he told his research team. "But their contributions to our technology are everywhere." His junior engineers looked uncomfortable. "Perhaps we should not investigate classified materials," suggested one. "The Council has good reasons for restricting access to certain information." But Corval could not let the mystery go. The galaxy's current problems seemed directly connected to the disappearance of Species H Prime. Whatever had happened to them had left a hole in galactic civilization that was only now becoming obvious. Admiral Vex ne'er faced a crisis of his own. Reports of unauthorized innovation were flooding in from across his patrol sectors. Young beings everywhere were experimenting with forbidden combinations of technology and ideas. Most attempts failed, but the successes were spectacular enough to inspire even more experimentation. The situation was spiraling out of control. Traditional authority structures were breaking down as young people ignored official procedures and developed their own solutions to problems. Some of their innovations were dangerous, causing accidents and system failures. But others were revolutionary breakthroughs that surpassed anything achieved through official channels. "We need to restore order," insisted his security chief. These unauthorized experiments threaten the stability of galactic civilization. "But they also solve problems that our official methods cannot handle," replied Vexner reluctantly. "The Kepler 442b solution saved 50,000 lives when our best scientists had given up hope. It was pure luck, said the security chief firmly. "We cannot base policy on random chance and rule-breaking." But Dexner was beginning to suspect that what they called luck might actually be something more important, something that galactic civilization had lost and was now desperately trying to rediscover. Hi. Strategist Veltar spent sleepless days reading through the classified Protocol Omega files. What he found there shattered everything he believed about the galaxy's golden age of peace and prosperity. The records showed that the species they had erased, the humans, had been far more important than anyone had realized. They had not just been another member species causing trouble through their chaotic behavior. They had been the primary driving force behind galactic innovation and progress for centuries. Human influence had shaped nearly every major scientific breakthrough, every technological advance, every medical discovery that had improved life throughout the galaxy. Their unpredictable nature had somehow catalyzed creativity and problem-solving abilities in other species. The files contained projections made by Council scientists before Protocol Omega was implemented. They had warned that removing humans might cause exactly the problems the galaxy was now experiencing. Innovation would decline. Problem-solving abilities would deteriorate. Young people would become increasingly dissatisfied with established order. But the Council had ignored these warnings, believing that order and stability were more important than chaotic progress. Now the galaxy was paying the price for that decision. Without human influence, civilization had become trapped in a slow decline that was disguised as perfect order. The most damning evidence came from a small probe that had somehow survived the temporal manipulation. Hidden in the outer reaches of what had once been the human solar system, it contained cultural and scientific data from the erased species. Veltar accessed the probe's records and found solutions to every crisis the galaxy currently faced. Crystal communication techniques that had saved Kepler 442b were described in detail. Advanced medical procedures that could cure supposedly incurable diseases were documented step by step. Energy system improvements that could revolutionize galactic infrastructure were outlined with mathematical precision. At the end of the data files was a message from someone called Ambassador Carl Rodriguez. If you are reading this, then you have learned what we tried to tell you. Chaos is not the enemy of order. It is the engine that drives progress. You will need us back, and when you do, remember that we forgave you before you even made this mistake. Veltar stared at the message for hours. The humans had known what the Council was planning. They had tried to warn them about the consequences. And even knowing they were about to be erased from existence, they had left behind the knowledge needed to fix the problems. Their absence would cause. The irony was overwhelming. The galaxy had eliminated humans to preserve order and stability, but in doing so had doomed itself to slow stagnation and decline. The very chaos that the Council had feared was actually the source of progress and innovation that kept civilization alive and growing. But admitting this mistake would require the Council to acknowledge the greatest error in galactic history. They had committed genocide against an entire species based on fear and misunderstanding. They had destroyed the timeline of billions of innocent beings because they could not tolerate unpredictability. Worse still, fixing the mistake would require implementing Protocol Omega in reverse, a process that would fundamentally change galactic civilization in ways that no one could predict or control. Veltar knew that the other Council members would resist this solution. They would argue for finding alternative approaches, for trying to artificially recreate human innovation without actually restoring humanity. But the evidence was clear. The galaxy needed humans back, not just their knowledge or their techniques, but their essential nature, their beautiful chaos, their wonderful unpredictability. The perfect order that the Council had created was actually a perfect trap, and the only way to escape was to admit that they had been terribly, catastrophically wrong. The emergency council session lasted for 7 days. For the first time in galactic history, the great crystal chamber echoed with raised voices and heated arguments. The perfect unity that had defined council decisions for thousands of years was shattered. High strategist Veltar stood before the assembly, displaying the evidence he had gathered from the classified files. Holographic records showed the true scope of human contribution to galactic civilization. Medical breakthroughs, technological advances, scientific discoveries, all bearing the mark of human collaboration or influence. "We made a mistake," he said simply. "The greatest mistake in the history of our civilization." Commander Vexner's mandibles clicked rapidly with agitation. "You are asking us to admit that we committed genocide against an innocent species, that we destroyed billions of lives based on our fear of their chaotic nature." "Yes," said Veltar without hesitation. "That is exactly what we did." Dr. Silent floated in her water suit, reviewing medical data on her portable display. The genetic degradation across all species, the declining innovation rates, the increasing difficulty in solving complex problems. Everything points to the same conclusion. We need them back. But other council members resisted. The ancient crystalline hierarchy representative spoke in tones like ringing bells. "Perhaps we can recreate their beneficial effects without actually restoring the species itself. We could study their techniques and implement them through proper channels." "We have tried that for 200 years, said Engineer Corval, who had been invited to present his technical findings. "The innovations require something we cannot replicate artificially. They require the chaotic, unpredictable thinking patterns that only humans possessed." The debate continued for days. Some council members argued that the galaxy could survive without humans if they just tried harder to be creative. Others insisted that admitting such a massive error would destroy the council's authority and throw the galaxy into chaos. "Chaos is exactly what we need," said Veltar firmly. "Our perfect order is killing us slowly. We have created a galaxy of followers with no leaders, of workers with no dreamers, of beings who can maintain what exists but cannot create what is needed." The young beings who had demonstrated human-like innovation were brought before the council to testify. Vex, the Korthic miner who had solved the crystal crisis, stood nervously in the great chamber. "How did you know to try communication with the crystals?" asked Dr. Silent gently. "I did not know," said Vex honestly. "It just felt like the right thing to do. When all the expert methods failed, I thought maybe we needed to try something completely different." "Something completely different," repeated Veltar. "That phrase appears in human cultural records constantly. They called it thinking outside the box." Shine, the Lumina maintenance worker, added her own observations. "When we worked together on Kepler 442b, we ignored all the rules about how different species should interact. We shared ideas freely and built on each other's thoughts. It felt natural, like we were remembering something we had forgotten." The testimony of the young innovators painted a clear picture. Without knowing why, they were rediscovering human approaches to problem solving. But without proper guidance, their attempts were unstable and often dangerous. Admiral Dexner presented security reports showing the spread of unauthorized innovation across the galaxy. "These random experiments are causing as many problems as they solve. We have had 17 major accidents in the past month alone, because they are learning by trial and error what humans could have taught them safely," replied Veltar. "We are watching the galaxy slowly and painfully rediscover what we deliberately erased." The council faced an impossible choice. Restoring humanity would require admitting the greatest crime in galactic history. It would mean using massive amounts of energy and resources to undo their own actions. Most difficult of all, it would mean accepting that their perfect order had been a fundamental mistake, but the alternative was watching galactic civilization slowly decay as innovation and creativity continued to decline. The evidence showed that without human influence, the galaxy would eventually stagnate completely. Dr. Cylon made the argument that finally swayed the council. We are doctors, engineers, leaders, and protectors. Our duty is to preserve and improve life throughout the galaxy. If we allow pride to prevent us from fixing this mistake, we fail in that duty. The vote was closer than any in council history. 7 species voted to implement Protocol Omega Reversal. 5 voted against it. The decision passed by the smallest possible margin. The technical challenges were enormous. Restoring an entire species to a timeline they had been erased from required. Precise coordination of temporal manipulation technology across dozens of worlds. Every member species had to contribute their most advanced equipment, and expertise. Engineer Corval led the technical team. Working with scientists who had opposed the restoration just days earlier, the irony was not lost on him. They were using the same collaborative approaches that humans had once championed, sharing knowledge across species lines and ignoring traditional bureaucratic barriers. We are becoming more human in order to bring humans back, observed Dr. Cylon during one of the planning sessions. The restoration process took months to prepare and only minutes to execute. As the temporal manipulation reached its climax, reality itself seemed to hold its breath. Space folded in ways that hurt to contemplate. Time bent backward along carefully calculated paths. High, strategist Veltar stood in the council chamber as the process completed, watching displays that showed the new timeline stabilizing. According to the readings, Earth had been restored to its original development path. Humanity had evolved, developed space travel, and joined galactic civilization exactly as they had before. But the restoration had consequences beyond just bringing humans back. The ripple effects of their return changed thousands of other events throughout galactic history. Medical techniques were rediscovered. Technologies were reinvented. Cultural exchanges were reestablished. The galaxy that emerged from the temporal restoration was different from both the original timeline and the human-free version. It was more dynamic, more innovative, more chaotic. It was also more alive with possibility than it had been for 200 years. Captain Jake Morrison materialized on the bridge of his ship, the Endeavor, completely unaware that he had ever been erased from existence. He was reviewing star charts for a mission to investigate unusual energy readings from a distant system. Dr. Lisa Grant continued her medical research in a laboratory that now contained equipment and techniques that had not existed in the human-free timeline. Her work on cross-species healing was advancing at an unprecedented rate. Engineer Nick Taylor examined power system designs that showed efficiency improvements far beyond what should have been possible with known technology. His modifications to the galactic energy network would revolutionize infrastructure across thousands of worlds. The council watched nervously as reports came in from across the galaxy. Human influence was already spreading, catalyzing innovation and creativity among other species. The young beings who had struggled to rediscover human-like thinking now found their efforts supported and guided by actual human collaboration. Have we made the right choice? Asked Commander Thexner during the first post-restoration council meeting. Ask me in 100 years, replied Veltar, but I know one thing for certain. A galaxy with humans will be unpredictable, chaotic, and probably very difficult to govern. It will also be alive in ways that our perfect order never was. The restoration was complete, but it was only the beginning. Humanity was back, bringing their beautiful chaos to a galaxy that had learned the hard way what happens when order becomes more important than life. The Council had wanted a galaxy without humans. Now they had a galaxy with humans who had been given a second chance at existence. What happened next would be the greatest adventure in galactic history.